Snow-capped mountains have supplied the city of La Paz with water for 600 years. But those taps are drying up, as many of the glaciers near the Bolivian capital have disappeared due to rising temperatures.
When we shower here at home, we recycle the water and use it also for the toilet to try to not use up the potable water.
People have been saving every drop they can after a drought left 3 nearby dams completely dry in 2017. Spring-fed public laundry houses have also become more popular because water there is free. Even saving rainwater has become harder.
The weather is changing. It is not like it was before. We used to wait for, let's say, spring and then the rainy season. But now, sometimes in the rainy season, it is hot.
A new UN report says the period from 2017 to 2019 is set to become the warmest 5-year stretch on record. It says the global temperature has risen 1.1 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. That's expected to rise to as high as 1.3 degrees Celsius in the next 5 years. The goal of the Paris Climate Accord is to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Like the glaciers near La Paz, the world's ice caps are also melting.
It is important that we take that into our minds and assume responsibility for what we're doing to the planet. We're seeing it here, it will come to the rest of the planet and is already visible in many parts of the world.
Millions of people around the world have gone on climate strikes to demand more action from policymakers. That's as the UN asks governments to commit to higher emissions reductions targets. The UN's message is, if global temperatures keep rising at the current rate, everyone will suffer, no matter where they live. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Well, for more, let's go to Sven Harmeling in Bonn, Germany. He's the global policy lead on climate change from the non-profit organisation CARE International. Welcome to the programme, Sven. So this United in Science report says climate change is accelerating with carbon dioxide levels increasing, sea levels rising and ice sheets melting faster than ever. What's your reaction to their findings?
Yeah, I think it's pretty concerning. I mean, the WMO is a very well-established organization and keeping track of all the temperature records, etc. And to see that in the last years there seems to be a trend of even accelerating global heating is quite concerning. I mean, it's something which scientists have long warned of, and I think it's just another strong signal that we really need to accelerate action to reduce emissions, as well as adapting to the climate change impacts everywhere on this planet.
Now, from your research, what's the impact of the climate crisis on a human level?
Yeah, I think we see it everywhere in different countries. I mean, for example, there's recently been a very heavy storm in Mozambique. We are also working there and have been helping people coping with the impacts, but there's been storms which have been become much stronger and more intense, partly due to climate change. We also see that sea level rise already is inundating, for example, coastal areas, and people suffer from basically losing harvest because the soil is getting too salty. We've seen this, for example, in Bangladesh. So there are a number of impacts which are really happening today, and which also already makes people's lives harder, in particular those of the poorest and most vulnerable, and in many cases marginalized women and girls.
Yes, now you work with a lot of these poor and marginalized communities around the world. So from your work on the field and your research, which parts of the world are most affected by the effects of the climate crisis?
Yeah, I think we definitely see a lot of impacts in coastal as well as rural regions. I mean, in particular, harvests are being affected quite a lot at the moment, or in the last years. Eastern Africa and Southern Africa has been particularly affected, and it's something where people try to develop solutions on their own, and we have a lot of people who are very active on that, but we also see that there are limits of what they can do with these rapid changes, and that's something where the international community is required to support those most affected, and those haven't even contributed to the problem. But I think overall we see many areas on this planet which are affected, and everywhere basically we need to scale up activities to address it.
Now, tell us more about the impact of the climate crisis on livelihoods. I mean, you talk about the effect that global warming has had on yields and harvests and that sort of thing, but are there any other effects on the economy, I guess on that community level, but also more broadly?
I mean, one element I think which is becoming increasingly concerning is the health impacts. For example, in the last years, there have been a couple of extreme heat waves, for example, in India or in Pakistan, and at certain levels of temperatures, it's just the bodies become really, I mean, it's something you really feel, and where you get to the limits you can really cope with, and it slows down the work of people. It makes people suffer. Also, many children, for example, suffer from malnutrition, partially because of loss of harvests. There are also challenges in terms of water availability, and we know water is needed everywhere. But if, for example, water is getting scarcer and people have to walk in rural areas much longer to get water, it's really a burden on women in particular. So these are some of the impacts we're seeing already today.
Okay, let's see what happens at this UN summit in New York. Sven Harmeling, thank you so much for your analysis tonight.